So, really into the first day of what would be the normal in-season routine. Monday, we had time to get a jump start on Tennessee personnel. We had a practice, kind of a bonus practice, and today would have been very much like our normal Wednesdays, with the Sunday game. Any questions?
Any concern with Trey Greenlaw?
At this point forward, and I appreciate the question, at this point forward, I'm not going to talk one thing about player injuries. We'll report what we're required to report, but you'll never hear me talk about how I feel it's going or any of that. And then really there's no advantage for me to discuss it.
Sean, you guys named captains yet? Is that come up?
We have named captains. Here are the 8 captains: Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton, Quinn Meinertz, DJ Jones, Pat Surtain, Talanoa Hufanga, Alex Singleton, Will Lutz. Those guys voted yesterday, had our captain's dinner last night, and they were announced last night.
You talk about the benefit of a player-led team. What have you seen from those guys during the offseason that made them?
I think it evolves. I think it's a process. I think you see the growth of that when the season begins. Then you see it tested, when you have some adversity. But I think it's something that organically, when you bring the right type of individuals together, I thought it was said well last night by one of the captains. Comment was, you don't have to be a captain to be one of our outstanding leaders, and I agree with that.
Sean, with DJ Jones, obviously you've had him for a couple of years here now. What has stood out to you from him? I mean, he's maybe not the loudest guy.
Well, he's got a veteran presence, his experience, his football IQ is high for what he does. He comes to work. He's got a good sense of humor. He's coachable and reliable, dependable. All those traits that are important to have in this league.
Sean, Coach DJ was a captain in San Fran the first time here. What's it say to you? That's probably the first time it's happened. A 9-year guy becomes a captain at that point in his career.
Yeah, I don't ever get surprised. When the votes come in, we kind of tally them up. It's how this team feels. And obviously, we don't take that vote until we have the cut down. I think leadership can be something that evolves as well. I don't think you're either born one or not. I think there's learned behavior in that, training in that, experience in that, and I'm proud of him. I'm excited for him.
Sean, with Hufanga, he's the only captain this year that wasn't on the team last year. How impressive is that for him to come in and win over?
Yeah, and it happened to Nix last year, and he was a rookie. So, again, I think there's enough. Obviously, it would be much more difficult for us to have been signing a player 3 weeks ago maybe. But when they get in during the off-season program and they're here for the better part of all the way up till the start of the season, I think that players, get a better feel for the leadership skill sets, and I'm excited for him as well.
Speaking generally and not about a specific player, but do you, when it comes to load management on a rehab type player, do you get involved or do you leave it all to the medical team?
Well, look, we always start with the medical team, and and we'll talk about players every night in the staff meeting, and players coming off of injury, players that have been in the league for a while. All those topics are discussed nightly in our staff meetings.
When you believe in a team, coach, you don't do it the shy way. You let it be known. You've expressed confidence.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say it was the shy way. It was just.
No, you're never like that. When you believe, you.
Yeah.
That's puffed out about it.
Yeah, my chest isn't puffed out. I just think this team is further along than when it was 2 years ago. And 2 years ago, quite honestly, we weren't near where we are now. And so this game, in the very beginning, I said, look, our goals obviously start with winning the division, best seed possible, play for a Super Bowl. And I think those are that's where your mind's got to be if you plan on winning one of those. You don't just arrive week 8 and say, man, we're on a roll, we might win this thing.
How do you think they've handled it now that camp's over and we're into week 1? The idea that
I think it's their expectations as well. The expectations to compete. All right. Obviously, Kansas City is the team that sat on top of this division, and they're awfully good. They've been very consistent.
Looking at Bo Nix, how much has he grown from his rookie year in terms of command of the huddle and his leadership and that sort of thing?
I think there's a natural growth relative to, especially the language. Because when you do come from college to any team in the NFL, you change languages, and that takes a while. And then, so that part of it naturally happens. And then, he's kind of had those leadership abilities probably for most of his football career. He trains hard. His expectations of himself are higher than any others, and that's a good thing. So yeah, all of that, relative to, going into the second season.
You've been around Eppinger for a few months now, but now that you go in and you're game planning with him in the picture, you haven't had a guy at that position like him in a little while. How nice is it, I guess?
It's nice to have. I mean, yeah, it's nice to have. His speed, his straight line speed's impressive. I remember that when he came out of Ole Miss and how he ran. And then the key in these game plan meetings, is putting their names on plays. Literally, it doesn't mean they always get it if they're first in the progression, but the player, today, for instance, has to know, all right, this play that we're running here has a good chance of going to Troy Franklin. Now, it may go to the running back underneath the zone coverage if it gets too deep. So I think it's important for the players to know that, that the attention to detail relative to having a top offense requires work, timing, and the smallest details are important.
Coach, what's the key to a fast start to get the season going, especially at home?
To win the first game.
Sean, just going back to Greenland for a second, has something changed since you spoke on it?
Again, I'm not talking about any player relative to the injury, respectfully.
No, when you look at
You're a guy that's been around this game as a player, as a coach for so long. Do the emotions change and evolve when it comes to getting ready for an opener? And what are the?
I would say it's the one. I mean, I would say no. I mean it's probably different your first year, right? But I would say you're anxious and excited, to see how your team matches up. We've all been running, when I say this blind race, there's 32 teams. We play these preseason games. And then, coming this weekend, everyone takes the blinders off, and you start getting a chance to see left and right, who's doing what and who's playing well. And I was pretty good at that carnival game where you had the squirt gun and you focused. Now listen, you focused at the target, and you had and the water had to stay right on the red dot. All right, and you had no idea where the other rockets were, and you have to spend your off season training like that, and then there comes a point though where you begin to see where you stack up, where you need to improve. And I would say our ability in weeks 1 through 4 to accelerate our learning, I think is critical. And it happened last year, not so much the year before. But, the debrief, the post-game evaluation as to why you won, why you lost, and then, there are a lot of good things sometimes on tape in a tough defeat, and then there are a lot of things in a big win that you look at and just say, man, we're fortunate. And so that accelerated learning for us has to meet those at the top of our league.
Sean, you've said efficiency against pass rush pressure is an 11-man operation. You talked about Bo grasping, better grasp of the language, but how much is everybody's improved grasp key to kind of being even more effective in pass rush?
Not like there's no 11-man pass rush pressure. Are you talking about just his ability to handle pressure defense?
The team's ability to handle.
Yeah. Look, everyone, third down night, which will be tonight, is a long night because you get a lot of different packages. We're going to see some packages maybe Sunday that, we hadn't seen last year, and they're probably not showing in the. So the two things that stood out in their 3 wins last year, Tennessee's 3 wins last year, they were outstanding defensively on third down. It just stood out. 28%, 27%, 17%. In other words, in their 3 wins, they played real good third down defense. And then one step further, you can be a defense that may give up yards, but if you're forcing field goals, and there comes, that play, that third down in the red zone, and you've heard me talk about it, it's a 4-point play. If you can convert offensively, there's a good chance you go on to score a touchdown. And if you can get off the field defensively, that element, that third down defense in the red zone is awfully important.
Sean, Jeffrey Simmons said this week Titans are preparing for Bo as kind of, a guy first read's not there.
Say it again.
Yeah, Jeffrey Simmons said Titans are preparing for Bo as a guy that maybe if the first read's not there, he'll get out, use his legs. As a coaching staff, are you guys preparing for the fact that, maybe opposing teams are not going to be surprised anymore by the fact that Bo can run? Has that been a part of the process?
We've talked about this before, and I hear the discussion a lot relative to now that they've had a I don't know. I think when you get to week 10 and week 11, you've had everything, and so some of the things happen spontaneously. I would disagree that he's just a first read. I know for a fact that that's not the case. Now, is he confident in his movement skills? Yeah, and we'll get a chance to see him on Sunday.
Sean, what are your thoughts just on the passion of Broncos fans? There's a 20-year wait for season tickets. There's over 100,000 people on the season ticket waiting list. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I mean, look, talking to a group the other day, we have this luncheon, and I just brought up there's 32 teams in this league that have a book, and some of those books, quite honestly, there's not a lot of reading in it. There just didn't. And then some of those books have some very good chapters. And some of those books, and I consider Denver's to be, one of those 3 or 4 that have a lot of good chapters to it. And the excitement is in 25, this team, this organization, ownership, fans, have a chance to add another chapter to a book that has a lot of tradition, and so that's what makes it exciting and fun. You want to coach, where people are trying to get tickets to the game, have trouble you want to play in that type of environment for those type of fans, and that's exciting.